I was born in Nairobi in Kenya, and I lived there until I was 3 years old. And then we moved to Uganda, and we lived on the River Nile in a small town called Ginger. It's not far from Ginger. You had the sugar plantations. Sugar was made there. Uganda is also rich in copper, tea, coffee, and my father ran a garage business and a transport business, so I grew up there until I was 12 years old. One day we were sat watching TV together as a family when Idi Amin, who'd overthrown Milton Obote, who was here at a Commonwealth meeting, took over the country and said that he'd had a dream that Muhammad had told him to get rid of all Asians within the country. Now, the thinking behind that was majority of the money and economics was held by Asians in that country. And I could understand his thinking where he wanted the black Africans to hold all that economic money and power and positions. So we had 90 days to leave the country. I think it was a really shock to me because England is a very small place. So I was really shocked to see small terraced houses, and whereas I'd been used to living in space, I could climb a mango tree to get a mango. I could go down to Lake Victoria, collect some clay. In the evenings, would sit and watch the hippos eat grass. From that to a completely white society was a real shock. But also the other shock for me internally as I began to grow in this country and faced racism within the school setting where none of the pupils would sit next to me, was a very difficult journey to go. And then I realised that what we call intergenerational trauma, in other words, how, because Uganda used to be part of the empire, the kind of messages that are fed unconsciously is that white's always better. I realised that my self-esteem and my self-respect and fear of failure was beginning to assert itself because I was really scared of walking into a room full of white people because internally I didn't think I was good enough. And that has taken me a long time to process, to look at. And I think the best thing I ever did was qualify as a social worker because that helped me to challenge, but also have some therapeutic input to actually begin to examine that stuff. So I think my journey as a refugee has been very relevant in the profession I've chosen because it's given me real empathy with people who have no voice. Marrying someone who is white and British was a really interesting experience because I remember for our honeymoon back in 1981, we went down to Cornwall. And if we walked down the streets holding hands, it was really interesting how we were looked at. And I can remember my daughter Rebecca, the oldest one, who is possibly more my colouring, at school when her dad would go and pick her up, they would say, well, that can't be your dad, he's white. I try to educate in a positive, empowering way. For instance, as a team manager, I went to a meeting with a headmaster in a school. Then the caseworker came with me, and he was a white male caseworker. And when the meeting ended, the headmaster automatically turned to my caseworker and said, can you now make a decision about what we're going to do? And he turned around and said, well, I think you need to ask my manager. And you could see the embarrassment in his face. My colleague said to me, why did you not challenge him? I said, because the very embarrassment had taught him a lesson. And for me to make him feel even worse about it was not empowering. But what I did was just ignored it, let him learn. I work from a principle that we're all learning. When my husband died, he was aged only, 45, and I fell in love with a female partner. People can cope with boxes, they can't cope with the fact that I fell in love with a human being. And sexuality to me is a continuum. I reject people wanting me to be put in a box. My life experience as a child and as a growing adolescent and a woman now has been formed by observation, watching, listening, and being comfortable with who I am and not being pressured into any box. I've always, wherever I worked as a manager or in any position of power, I've always looked to opening up really difficult concepts for people to talk about. As if somebody makes a comment that is racially not correct, don't chew them up, open it up. Let's talk about it and say, look, that really offended me. Can we talk about it so you understand what's going on? If we don't watch how we are, we end up oppressing. That takes it away from certain races and brings it back to the nature we have as people. That if we are not self-aware, if we do not do the work on ourselves, in any situation we can become oppressive. I think we should be able to have the space to be able to accept lots of views, lots of thinking, and allow people to define themselves in who they are. We have to become more and more emotionally intelligent and more self-aware so that we end up being empowering people. We're honest about our feelings, about our attitude, and work in an environment where we can do that without fear of being attacked or being seen as a certain way.